So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Andrew Turner, the founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today we have an amazing guest, and he's coming to join us from Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And his name is Jonathan McGuinness. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you very much for setting this up. Delighted to be coming from a quarter way around the world to talk to you.
Exactly, amazing. Just to show us how technology can help out these days. So I know we met a while ago at actually a movie premiere, didn't we, in London?
We did. Brian Rose's movie premiere where he had done the IronMind.
Exactly, IronMind, the movie.
And I think it was excellent.
I think he's actually just released another movie, actually, hasn't he, already? Just one recently, last week.
Yeah, there's a new one. I think there's a series. He's done Dorian Yates, he's done Portal, and he's done his own IronMind. And now I think this is the fourth one.
Okay, so this is the one about the ayahuasca, I think, isn't it? In Costa Rica.
Yeah. The psychedelics environment. I think he likes the inspiration that he gets from those sorts of events.
Maybe that's us in the future.
Maybe.
So I know we talked about you coming on the podcast, and I know you've been a busy boy for the last few months, so it's good to have you here. And I suppose one of the things we wanted to explain to the guests is a bit of your backstory and your kind of the reason you're what you're doing today. So what gets you up in the morning today? What do you do these days?
Okay, my backstory is an Irish accent, as you can hear that. What motivates me is 4 young boys who need an example rather than someone who talks.
Yeah.
And what led me to this path, to put it brief, is I came out of college when the beginning of the internet started happening in the 90s. Which led me to Norway and the mobile telecoms, and through 20 odd years now, I've lived in Thailand this year. I'm currently living in Malaysia and working on different projects around the world. So my key focuses at the moment are in Malaysia and Switzerland.
Okay, fantastic. And is
I suppose what gets me up in the morning, maybe just to continue that, is because I'm working with entrepreneurs, they have to think of everything. They have to think of their clients, how to get their clients, their funding, how to get them, how to work with people, how to manage people. We say the concept of a role or a job or a description of what you do becomes somewhat unlimited. And personally, I think our own self-development and your development of an entrepreneur are tightly aligned. So I'm actually almost treating that like a self-development course sometimes.
What, you mean your actual day job, you mean?
My day job, because, dealing with different types of circumstances, both good and bad, how much energy can you accept? If someone said to you, I'll give you a few million in the morning, how comfortable are you with that? Or someone said, you're in trouble because what you did is wrong. You have to face the good and the bad every day when you're an entrepreneur. And,
Right.
and that's exciting, and you have to grow for it. So that's what I enjoy about it.
But it sounds like you've been kind of plowing some interesting things over the things you've done. So you've kind of been involved in the early part of the internet, the early part of mobile telecoms, then obviously in banking. So you've obviously seen quite a lot of change. But then maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but so you now, what, you are an entrepreneur, or you work with entrepreneurs, or you do both, or?
I am both, but I'm working with 2 startups at the moment. And maybe to give a bit more background on what you said about the mobile coming on the internet, I was very much involved in the mobile internet coming on to GSM. So when GSM data, SMS on map, USSD were protocols that they were considering for how will they put the internet on the mobile.
Okay.
I was looking to be part of that through my Telenor engagement at the time. And that led to 10 years worth of telecoms, including Nokia at their heyday before the iPhone came in 2007. And that was a very interesting period, because we did a lot of things in the 90s that never really got used until we had the right terminals like the iPhone, the proper bandwidth where you could actually send pictures, videos, and streaming. So even when I'm involved in startups now, that gives me the background to say, are your ambitions related to the ecosystem, Or are you realistically looking at 5 or 7 years from now? We take blockchain, for example. A lot of them require the elements of the community, the government, the institutions of education, of health, or whatever, to also be enabled to take advantage of that intercommunication using those types of tools. And so when someone comes up to me and say, okay, we can do this here and now, I'm very doubtful or skeptical, probably because of that mobile internet experience, to say, hold on, the ecosystem isn't actually in place. Let's see what's practical in the next year or two. And it's great to have
I see. Okay. I see. So what you're saying is that you some of the stuff you were working on in the 90s with Nokia, etc., was too early, and it only became mainstream and mass adoption after that next S curve. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, like for example, I developed a mobile banking service in 1998 for a Norwegian bank. Over the mobile phone on a protocol called WAP or WAP.
WAP. Yeah, WAP. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. But
it's terrible. It's terrible, that service.
Absolutely, but the channel had begun to be there, but it wasn't wide enough in terms of bandwidth, and the terminals weren't good enough.
Yeah.
But now everybody, 20 years later, everybody uses it. So that ecosystem didn't come into place. Well, they got 3G in, and they got mobiles that were, usable. And now, if you look at most websites, they're actually viewed from mobile rather than PCs or whatever we would have used back in those days.
Yeah, like
so
mobile web, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you're better off building an Android or iPhone app than you are setting up a website as such now.
That's quite. You're spot on actually there, because actually, what is WAP? It was basically mobile web, wasn't it? As it is today. It's like running Chrome on your iPhone, or Safari on. Is it Safari? No, running Safari on your iPhone and Chrome on your Android phone. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, you were one of the creators then. You were like forming the foundations.
Well, I was in with Telenor, who were one of the pioneers. So I was involved with with a pioneer company at that time, and that kind of led to understanding the mechanics deep down of how the two industries come together. The internet telecoms industry for a while were separate, and then they converged, and that's what happened.
And why was it? Why do you think it came out of Telenor? What was your take on that? Why Norway? Is
the background
government?
No, well, I think the background for them, even before GSM, there was NMT, which was the Nordic protocol. Their terrain is all mountains. They can't put down land.
Right.
So the necessity to even create mobile was there, nothing to do with the internet. Then the internet came along, and there was always going to, there's always a potential convergence with two things that are inclusive communications. And they were, at that time, they were in 26 countries around the world, and now probably even more.
So it was actually their local geography and their local terrain that kind of drove them to actually have developed something like mobile.
Necessity is the mother of creation.
Another quote.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting though. But also the thing is that as to your point, is that people from just accept that as the norm now. That mobile banking, you've got your Lloyd's account or you whatever bank account you're using, Monzo or whatever. You just accept it as being the norm. When, as you said, 20 years ago, it was like groundbreaking.
Absolutely. I had a friend who used to go around with one of these
transportables.
And this was in the early 90s, and I think it was more for ego purposes than actually making a phone call.
Yeah, because the battery pack was bigger than the actual phone, wasn't it? you had to have like a shoulder strap.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think what also drives those types of technologies as well is most people, when they got a mobile phone in the beginning, thought, I'll have it in the car. It's insurance in case I break down or something. Same with the credit card. People thought, I'll get a credit card in case I'm a bit short of money or whatever. So new technologies often sneak in the back door of it could be necessary in an emergency. That's another way. Psychologically, the customers do the adoption of it as well. So there's multiple elements there.
And you said that then so how did you get into banking then? How did that traverse into banking from from the work that you did in Norway, or was it just by was it? I suppose did you just fall into this technology stuff, or did you plan it? Was it?
Well, it was all technology, and I was a driver of it. For personal reasons, my wife is from Italy and I'm from Ireland, and Switzerland sounded like a nice target point at halfway. So I invested time in going down to meet people in Switzerland, because they also, from a banking point of view, they invest an awful lot in technology.
Yeah,
So I met a number of them, and from what I had done in Nokia and other huge companies, you know, the technology was transportable, and then it led to moving on to helping them with their data warehouses, and still on the technology end of it. But then you come into a new industry at the front end, which you begin to understand, and that's sort of 12 years ago now. So the banking domain is quite familiar to.
Yeah, because I remember when I was at WANdisco, after I'd left Tesco, and we were assigned to banks, and I was with Credit Suisse, one of the CIOs of Credit Suisse in London, in Canary Wharf, and I said, you know, how would you describe a bank? And he said, we describe it as relationships and technology.
Absolutely, they have one of the highest spends in technology. I was looking at it recently there, even the PE ratios on the stock exchange for different types of companies. And, you know, the financial services industry is way ahead, so they have that money to invest in those technologies.
But yeah, you know, if you talked, you know, one of my friends is Chris Skinner, who's the Financer, you know, the website. I don't know if you probably met him. I met him for a drink the week, and he's always good value. And he obviously posts quite a lot about, you know, financial services, about and there's one even funny, like last few days about the number of lines of COBOL, you know, the very old programming language that's sat in banking systems. And yet the average age of a COBOL programmer is 61. So they're all kind of either retiring or obviously going on to do something else. And yet, you know, I think it's 85% of the code in ATM machines is written by it contains COBOL. So it's like, but the concept of technical debt, which you probably understand, you know, where people, you know, continue to develop new features, but they don't sort all the technical things that actually could take the system down. But yeah, he was analogizing to Stripe, actually, which was actually quite an interesting one, which is obviously a bit of a unicorn in the fintech space. Yeah, Stripe, the two very successful Irish,
yeah.
Exactly. So three Irish brothers who created Stripe have now got a multi-billion-dollar business based on payments. But they were saying that a third of the developer time in Stripe is actually still addressing technical debt. So it just shows from a tech point of view, you know, whether you're a large bank, obviously they've got a bigger legacy issue, or you're a sexy fintech, you know, cool fintech. You still got that kind of thing where you've got to look after technology, otherwise it kind of looks after you. So
there's always at the center of problems like that. There's always one or two technologies that are or they're monopolies in some way. So if you take a lot of execution global firms, they use SAP for everything on the execution all the way to the front end as a fully ERP. But then if you take banks, they have systems like Swift, etc., where they fully have to integrate per se, etc. And once you have any large types of dependencies, technology dependencies within a particular industry, then you're always going to have to interface back to that legacy, no matter, you know, what it decides to do or not to do. Quite often, it's better to build something from scratch than it is to try and build value-added services on top of a behemoth, if you want to call it that. So what we probably need in that ecosystem is fully digital banks, not dependent on those other systems, can interface to them, but not dependent on them.
And I suppose that's a good segue to, you know, one of the other topics, I suppose, that you raised a bit earlier, which was, you know, the whole blockchain topic and the whole decentralized payment piece, you know, where, you know, the whole future of banking. There's obviously a lot of stuff about digital banks where they, you know, get rid of all the legacy and start again. But there's also, you know, from my recent experience in working in the blockchain space, I can see that being an absolutely transformational piece for payments and financial services as well. I don't know what your view on that is.
So I like a couple of examples. We take the Revolut example, which are not blockchain, but what they're doing is creating a digital global bank where they actually partner with different banks around the world and then make FX and the use of different currencies and payments so much faster. Now I can press a button, I can give you £20 to have a pint or two, and it's instantaneous. You just need to have an account and you have it there. There's no, in the background, I could, if I wanted to, have IBANs and SWIFT and everything, but literally all I need now is your phone number, assuming that you have an account of some sort. And you'll be anywhere in the world and give you whatever currency at a very reasonable price. So
a quick question on that. So, I mean, given your knowledge of banking, so in that Revolut example, what actually are Revolut doing? Because are Revolut actually paying through the normal payment system, or actually are they creating a new payment system? What's your take?
My understanding would be they have partner banks in each country, wherever they have a country, and they do a netting on all the individual transactions, which brings the price down so that from a customer point of view, it's almost minimal. And they consolidate all of their actions through partner banks, and then let the legacy banks, if you want to call it that, do all the dirty work because of the systems they have, and they don't have to over interact with that.
So they've kind of put like the icing on top of the cake, and then effectively, but there's still the same process about settlement. Everything happens on a daily basis, like it usually does.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's kind of like a digital lipstick. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's like having an iPad for a front end and a typewriter for a back end.
That's a good quote. And what's your view on blockchain then? Any view on that?
I've been involved with blockchain. I downloaded even Ethereum, set up a few nodes, set up a few contracts to understand how it actually works, played with it. Because to have a conversation, I need to understand how it works. After we say doing that particular one, which Ethereum itself has a lot of scalability issues. I'll call it the third generation. The first generation being Bitcoin, the second generation being Ethereum, and a number of them that added contracts, etc. Now there's like a third generation. I'll give an example of IOTA. Charles Hoskins runs that. Hoskinson. They're very, if you look up on any of the sites, you can see that there's over 7,000 blockchain exchanges now at the moment, or I don't know how many currencies. So they're mostly built within themselves, within their own ecosystem. So the inter-exchange of different types of tokens and using different types of exchanges, that ecosystem now is being built by this third generation of blockchains. And what they're also, there's another group, where I call it 3.A, who are also discussing not having the nodes per se, but reverting back to a centralization of work in data centers and having light nodes.
Is this the Lightning Network?
Not that particular one, but that wasn't what was in mind. But that idea there to make the scalability happening. Besides, the various, it's not proof of work anymore. You've hashing, you've different types of we say proofs in order to prove the blockchain, rather than the work. So back to the mobile internet example, I think it really still has 5 years to go. We need real world execution of it that's really scalable. We've had so many rumors about particular countries setting up their own e-currency. I haven't actually seen it yet, but we know it's probably on the way at some stage. If a country can actually bring that to life, that would be probably the best use case for all of the other ones to start adoption on a bigger level.
But I was invited to a session. I can't really. It happened in the last few weeks actually. But there's a session in Switzerland where there was a new crypto bank had launched recently.
Yeah, Seba Crypto. That's
Seba. Yeah.
Yeah. So and they've actually got a bank license as well now,
Mm.
and they've a lot of partner banks where they're going to do the blockchain integration on behalf of banks or corporates for
Right.
what they do. Now the question, I don't know the architecture well enough, is it similar to Revolut, putting a layer on top, but putting a blockchain layer rather than, we'll say, a presentation and user interface layer? Details I don't know, but they're well into action. The FINMA from Switzerland have given them their license, and they're working with now, I think, 24 partners, investors, to actually do that, we'll say, blockchain integration for them. I wish them well.
So they would effectively, they would do what, utility token? They would do tokens. They would trade tokens.
Yeah. Yes. You know, so you would take one example that's well known, the US utility settlement. So what that is, interbank settlement using a token. There was I'm not sure how big the group is now. It was 15, 17 at one stage, where the settlement could happen via token. So that is a big project. But all of those types of things, when it comes to banking, the most important questions are actually legal, responsibility, default, debt. So if something goes wrong with the technology, where does the, what's the consequences of a default of any participant in that group?
Okay.
So lawyers will have to have their day on the pitch, or 10 years on the pitch, to answer that type of question.
So what's the cover on that particular transaction? Is that what they're thinking?
Yeah. So if in any financial transaction, if any party doesn't defaults, then the question is, can you roll back? Do you go forward? And blockchain has a non-rollback methodology, if you want to call it that. It goes forward. So how do you roll back a transaction that was defaulted on? So you can't really. What you have to do is have a complete transaction or a clause that says, okay, didn't work, it'll never be complete because somebody defaulted or whatever that is.
Right.
So it's not like traditional technology where a rollback situation is a very feasible thing. But I don't think that's even the issue. The technology can solve it. It's more when you come into new arrangements and new associations, who will take responsibility for which actions.
So you think that's a way off yet then, basically?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I do. It's no more than, the European Union. How long is it going? Ireland joined it in 1973, the same time as Britain, who are now exiting it. And that's almost 50 years ago. And that even came from something that, I know, France, Italy, and Germany started over coal and iron originally. So those communities take a long time to build. They're economic communities. And the main one that really tied them together was the idea of the euro, which the British didn't participate in, which happened around 2000. So it was already so many years in existence before the economic pegging or union happened. So, nobody really wants to be pegged to anyone else. And I think that's part of the existence of the financial community coming together on any new technology. Because it's not about the technology, it's about the obligations and the potential situations within that community.
Yeah, I mean, I reacted like that, but actually I voted to stay.
All right, okay.
Because I don't know what your view. I mean, I'm not saying diversifying to that topic, but it's been pretty hot topic over the last few weeks. I mean, if you think about the euro currency, it's kind of, I suppose, has it been successful? Has it not been successful? It was a new currency that was created. I suppose it's this thing about if you look at money in general, it's gone through obviously different iterations, hasn't it? And this digital currency seems to be the latest craze and the latest area to change everybody's fortune. Because one of the things I find incredible is still that there's a few billion people who don't actually have a bank account, and actually multiple people who find it difficult to get access to a bank account. It's like billions of people, which is absolutely staggering if you think about it from a development of the world.
There's a whole set of industries based on that now, in terms of micro loans, microservices, prepaid credit cards, so that, you know, those who wouldn't have the possibility to enter the credit system still can have financial services now, but they pay a premium even for doing that.
Yeah. So I suppose part of the thing about sharing your story and stuff like that was, you know, obviously we've got a bit of a T diversion there, but on the technology side. What about the G side? So, I mean, is there anything you would like to share around your growth story? What are the kind of, you know, from a personal business point of view, what are the things you've learned over the time you're doing these different things? It sounds like you've been involved in quite a lot of technological major change.
Sure.
From a personal point of view, how have you traversed that journey as well?
I continuously learn, even today. You know, if we talk about today, I think I'm on 2 Udemy courses and researching different things. So, you know, being involved in technology means you're involved in a lifetime of learning. So that's just not what
it just seems to get faster. Yeah.
It seems to get faster, and you don't even count them. You don't even put them on your CV. It's just part of learning for the next challenge. If you know you need to have a certain type of conversation, you need to learn about that subject, learn the background, how it works, how it doesn't. In terms of personal growth, it hasn't been all good, as I've had a couple of downtimes. You know, going as a consultant and taking those risks per se, or setting up your own business. There's the consequences of bad and good, and I think probably 2002 to 2004 was a pretty tough time for myself. I could blame a lot of things. I could say, you know, there was, you know, September 11th in 2001, the market went down, which is true as well. But what I have recognized on a personal level, because well, let me give you another example. When 2008 happened, it had no impact at all on me. I was, you know, engaged in multiple contracts. What I have learned is that when you start to think you know, or you're at the top of your game, you lose the edge for learning.
You lose what, sorry? You lose the
edge for learning.
Right.
And you actually, well, I had become, I would say, even a little bit egotistical. I know stuff, or I'm doing stuff, or it's happening. Taking things for granted. And the moment I notice now, if I'm taking things for granted, I have to go, hold on, step back, or I'll be on a bad path.
Right.
And because you reduce your hunger. So if I say it, or if I hear someone else say, I know, it means that person is not listening. So the conversation's effectively over. And quite often I'll just walk away. But I was the one doing it, so that's how I've learned it. So it's really, and that affects your business, because if you're not listening to your customer or your investor or who you're involved with, people who work with you, everything can only go in a bad way from that point. So monitoring, to say, my own attitude, whether that's of appreciation of what's happening versus taking it for granted, has a huge impact on personal and business life. And that becomes very obvious very quickly. Personally, I did a bit of a graph of it in my life, and I think from the moment of my attitude change, within about 6 months, it impacts my relationships, my revenues, etc. There isn't a long gap between the change in your attitude and the consequences in your life. You know? So I consider entrepreneurship and personal psychology highly interlinked, Andrew.
So is that being present? Is that what you're thinking? Is about being in the moment, being present, being, you know, actually listening to people, you know, active listening? It's that kind of stuff. Is that what you're saying that you weren't doing? Or
the answer to that is yes, plus. And what I mean by the plus is you can be listening, but the question is, what attitude do you have when you're listening? Are you judging? Are you being compassionate? Are you just letting it happen? You know, that attitude that you bring into that moment, because we're not in that moment blankly, is probably the most powerful factor. We can often be in the moment, but if you're not in the moment if you're judging, because you're using past criteria and placing it on the sense that you have. But being in the moment is very particular to me. It means I'm coming in and saying, okay, well, I'm appreciating this 20 seconds of silence Andrew has given me to express mine. Or I'm saying, oh dear, what's the next question? Am I future judging? Or hold on, that last one was bad. You know, the answer, I could have done better on that. Where is my head in that moment is talking about what I'm talking about and appreciating the environment we're in at that moment, you know. So it being in the moment, it has very particular criteria, I'd say.
So I mean, you said about a particular period, 2002 to 2004.
Yeah.
Because, and you know, I mean, I've been through peaks and valleys, right? So you have these kind of things that you're going like this, and it goes like this, and then it comes back a bit. And you know,
Yeah.
we've all been through that. So you know, you're not alone in that experience. You know,
but I don't mind if I interrupt you there, Andrew. You do in that moment sometimes feel alone. Like I remember, I would say in that, I don't know, was it 2002 or 2003? I had piled up a lot of debt for investing in the previous company, and that's why I was in the bad situation, and I was contracting.
Right.
I had read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh yeah, Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah.
A few years beforehand, and I'll tell you in a minute what he said in the book, but I'll tell you my experience. I was on a contract in Milan, and I was walking down into the tube station. At the bottom of the stairs was a beggar, a guy going, "Dammi un euro," you know, give me a euro, you know, he was begging for money. And when I looked at him, the book came back into mind. And what came back into mind is, hold on, am I poor or am I broke? Poor means, okay, I plan on being in this bad situation for a long time, at least in my mind. And broke means it's temporary. Mm-hmm. That was insightful. That was me going down, even though I'd already got a contract. Mentally, in that moment, I went up because I decided I was broke, not poor.
Okay.
And, you know, it's moments like that when you make distinctions that you actually change how you act, and your attitude changes automatically. So reading as much good material, like I'm a bookaholic. I still am, between Kindle and still love an old paper book. Getting that information that when you're ever in situations, you've references that put you on a potential different track, because you can make distinctions that you wouldn't have been able to if you didn't have that sort of huge chunk of knowledge from all the reading that you do. In the moment, you may not appreciate it. You might enjoy it, but then when it comes to real life situations, your brain references things and goes, hold on, that's useful. And you change what you're doing in your life.
Well, I mean, you know, speaking of, yeah, no, it's, I can relate to a lot of what you just talked about. I think you realise as you get older, it's not all about the money. It's about the experience.
Sure.
Maybe I'm being philosophical here.
Go for it.
No. I think that when I was younger, I was kind of, I think you get on this kind of travelator of wanting to be X and Y and have Z, you know, A, B, and C, and then you actually get there and you go, okay, what's all that about then? So you then realise it's there's a different journey that you need to go on. There's a different level you need to get to. And part of the reason why I'm doing this, I suppose, this podcast series, is because I like to meet gifted and talented people. I like to meet people who've got experiences and share about that, because I think you're always learning. And you know, the last few years I've met some fantastic people, including yourself, who've opened up. I think about, you know, because I think there's this thing about the mask. You know, this thing like Lewis Howes talks about with, you know, the mask that's the mask of man. They have to be a, you know, masculine and a provider and a, you know, the strength and everything like that, but actually they have lots of insecurities as well. You know, one of the things I think you put me onto was meeting Mr. Kipp, Mr. Mastin Kipp.
Oh, yeah, fabulous guy.
You know, a few months ago, and you know, who could have foresawn that? You know, we spoke on the Thursday, and then, oh, surprise, he's in London on the Monday, and actually then end up actually, you know, spending a few minutes talking to him live. This is the guy that Oprah Winfrey thinks is an absolute genius. He's like the new Tony Robbins. And I'm, you know, go to a church, spend 3 hours in a church with him, with 300 people in London, and you know, people really opening up about their real story, and you know, all the trauma that they've been through, etc., etc. It was fascinating. So that book, Claim Your Power Back, is it? Claim back your power.
It's a 40-day adventure into your own life.
Exactly, and I know that you're going through it, and I'm going through it as well. So it's definitely something that I thank you, tip my hat for pointing me in that direction. It was very, very good.
Well, like just to go on that point, Andrew, you know, I'm involved in 2 companies right now, one in Malaysia and one in Switzerland, and people that I'm dealing with, I'm learning from. I'm probably also giving, you know, it's mutually beneficial, but maybe that's the most important factor in being involved in those ventures, is because there's a mutually beneficial relationship where I'm learning from them, they're learning from me in some way. And the level of honesty, every time you have to make a decision, you have to bring out, oh, what are my personal boundaries? And sometimes you're not aware of your own boundary till it's crossed and you feel bad. Maybe you feel angry or what, are disappointed or whatever it is. But when you're always having to make decisions, when you're setting up a new business, for example, then you're always potentially having moments where your personal boundaries are being crossed, and you have to begin to become more aware to recognize them. What am I comfortable with? Am I taking direction here, or I'm being taken advantage of in this situation? And a lot of it's new. You mightn't even know the terminology or whatever else. So a lot of discussion has to happen when you're on new ventures, and that's where I probably go back to saying that entrepreneurship and self-development are very much one and the same.
Yeah, it's a journey of discovery. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I realised that back in my history, working in big corporates and then working in startups and corporates and then working in startups, jumping on planes going to Silicon Valley and having, zero business, and then having to, do sales from scratch. And then, it's extremely character building. Because you realise that, if you don't execute on anything, then nothing gets done. There's nobody to delegate to.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely a good experience. It's set me up for what I'm doing today. So you said you were doing some stuff in Malaysia and Zurich, and what kind of areas you're involved in?
In Zurich, I'm involved in a company that is, we say, automating treasury for large corporates to large banks. So they, a major corporate in the world would have multiple banks all around the world in whatever country that it's operating. And the process for doing that is very individual. It's back to the iPad typewriter thing. It all should be digital on the front end, but is it actually cooperating at that same level in the back end? And we've spotted that gap in the treasury side. The company's called Delica Banks, and we're now in the process of ramping that company up, along with a guy called Riccardo Balsamo, Italian, and it's going very well. The momentum behind it, the want in the industry on both sides of the equation, from the corporates and the banks, to solve this problem is high. And the main factor here is actually, satisfying their desire to solve that pain. If it's it's in the future of what they want to do. Back to the digitalization of banks, this is an area where not all elements in what they have to do in digitalization is up to speed, because you're probably not going to change an entire bank, everything from retail bank to investment bank to asset management, etc., in one go. That might happen slices at a time.
It's just too big to do, isn't it?
But this addresses one of those slices in the treasury area. And then in Malaysia, I'm involved in another tech company that's doing microservices and supporting companies that are building trading platforms. So they're trading on exchanges, which is part of, I suppose, effectively the brokerage and the investment banking.
And then what, they're trading, normal securities, or is it?
Exactly.
Right.
Securities, currencies, etc. Whereas my part of that is getting involved on the tech platform that they need in order to be able to do that. Now, there's a lot of platforms out there. There's a lot of we say it's fairly mature, the front end of that particular system. And this doesn't address the back end, it's just supporting more people being involved in the front end of say, the brokerage scene.
And so you kind of, have you always been plural, as I would call it? You know, you've always had multiple things going on in your life, or have you kind of just moved to that? You know, were you in a single role and then you went to multiple and then you've gone back to single and then back to multiple, or how has that evolved?
So I think there's a distinction here. Somebody mentioned you can have a blueprint or you can have a gene. And a blueprint means you sort of, that's the future of who you're going to be and it's already mapped out. You know, even talking about humans, or you can have a gene, and depending on what environment that gene is placed, it will grow in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think it's, and I think a gene is more analogous to real life, whereas a blueprint is sort of, oh, we'll set a goal in place and we'll try to work towards it. If I look at my life from a work standpoint, I was an employee for 1 year, and then I went to consulting.
Oh wow! Okay.
So that, and from then on into some businesses and out. It was a lot of the consulting I did was 100% occupancy, if you want to call it that. But not necessarily by choice, because I actually believe that if you have 2, 3, or 4 clients, which is all manageable, you have a lot less risk than you do having one job or one client, because it's you know, natural consequences. People change, or things change, relationships change. If one of them goes away and you have 4, you know, you're still in a reasonable position. If one goes away and you have 1, you imagine you're in a corporate and they make an executive decision, you know, we want to outsource that particular department or that particular function to another country or even to another company. You know, if you're not in the right part of that organization, you've no choice about your next step. So plural, I think, is a more natural state. I think the idea of singularity gives people the idea of security, i.e. being an employee or having one client.
Yeah.
The reality is it's the riskiest of all. But the way institutions, including the governments, recognize even social payments. If you're an employee, you get a different grade of social recognition for what you did than if you were an entrepreneur, where you have to prove everything that you did to get the same recognition, if you're talking about state pensions or whatever else. So the system, we say most government systems are built to actually encourage employees, which is also the most heavily taxed part of the community. You know, so me personally, I think it just makes logically more sense to have 2 or more clients from a professional point of view, and then it's a risk reduction activity. And then building an organization, even if it's small, around yourself to be able to manage that, because you can't be in 2 places at once.
Yeah, but I think you're spot on with that piece around the, you know, it's back to Taylorism, isn't it? About the factory mentality, about, you know, all the policies and procedures and governance of it is all orientated towards driving people into one particular type of occupation, one type of existence, and then they create hurdles, or they make it even a lot harder to do if you break that mold, if you go away from that model. So yeah, I mean, I think
if you can feel certainty inside rather than having it come from outside, you'll break that mental barrier and then go for, we say, 2 or 3 or more clients as a modus operandi. If you want to ask, what am I teaching my kids? I'm teaching them, you know, they're still in college or in school, but when I have conversations with them, or when they see what I do, because teaching is more by example anyway, no matter what I say, is keep 2 or more in your life from that perspective, because it's, you know, they've been through the hard times as well as the good times with me, so they know the consequences of change.
Right. Yeah. So you're making them robust from day one.
Oh, I don't know. I can tell them they still have to live their own lives and make their own mistakes, and I'll be there for them. And that's good to make mistakes, but at least that idea, the goal of their idea is in that direction. Whereas know, my parents' idea for me, and they were doing the best they could. This has nothing to do with intent. Their idea would have been, you know, go get a particular job and stay in it for your life, sort of thing, you know. But I know very few people who do a 30, 40-year employment anymore. I just don't think it exists, or it's very, very rare if it does.
Well, I think that's. I don't know if you remember that phrase by Reid Hoffman, you know, the guy that founded LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But he actually calls it the tour of duty now. So people, you know, so what I've noticed, some entrepreneurs and some tech CEOs that I've worked with, they try and convince the team that, you know, everything's going to be there. They're going to be there forever. We're going to be one team, etc., etc. And I think the phrase that Reid used about tour of duty is that, you know, we're here on this mission, and you know, it might not last forever, but let's try and work out how we make it fun. You know, do the best we can. You know, make some history while we're here, and we work together effectively as a team. And I think it's a really good. It's obviously a military analogy. But
it sounds more honest, Andrew, because in essence, you know, if someone's setting up a business, one of their criteria is when or how might I exit. Okay, they mightn't really know, but they will have ideas about how will they exit. So telling people that it's forever, which can happen. There are some people who drive an organization and keep it for the life, but I don't think it's the norm, because people acquire companies now. Mergers and acquisitions are rife to build value of companies, and if someone gets an exit, they might likely take it. So telling them it's a tour of duty sounds like the more honest thing to do.
So what's your? So it sounds like you've got a couple of different things you're doing, and obviously there's a bit of a geographic logistics thing around that.
Sure.
So how do you? I mean, it sounds like one's in the software industry and one's in the kind of financial services industry. So you're kind of different as well, is that right? Or are they both financial services?
They're both software, but they're both supporting financial services.
Okay.
So I'm still technically orientated, but they're both actually supporting the financial services.
So what's the dream for those two ventures you've got at the moment then?
The dream is to build up solid teams. In essence, one of them now, we have a good roadmap. Well, I think for both of them, we have a good roadmap and necessary funding for next year. And once you get to a certain point, then you got to go, okay, well, what's the plan beyond that? So if you get to a point of your revenue / funding matches up for the next year, then me and my role is to go, okay, well, what's the next step after that? And be always thinking one step ahead and building that team to make sure, okay, the actual plan gets executed, but now we're building the new plan to escalate the value of the service of the company to the investors, etc. So for me, it's getting involved in new types of, you know, what are the next level clients? What is the next level of funding? I think we've had a couple of conversations offline about, you know, if you start to go Series A, or if you start, you could be doing SME clients or large corporate. So if you're going to go to that next level, you have to reconsider who your ideal client is. You have to reconsider what type of investments you need to actually onboard them. Because the larger type of client you go for, I'm not talking on the retail side, but in terms of the corporate world, the more investment up front, the longer the sales cycle. Whereas the retail, there's more investment up front to be the best in class. So enough people will actually, on the retail, you know, would you want to bring out an app that already, where there's 20 or 30 of them in the market? Unless you have something significantly better, there's no point. It's already commoditized.
Yes, yeah.
Unless you have a client base that clearly just want to have you to do it, and you can build on that and leverage it somehow. But in the pure market terms, it's already a commodity.
And then that's down to the strength of your balance sheet, and actually then how you do the appropriate planning. Because obviously, you know, my observation in working in Silicon Valley is obviously the VCs will you know, quite willingly give you more and more money, or the private equity firms give you more and more money. But all that happens there is you just get more and more dilution, and obviously control of the company. So that's one of the kind of the kind of balancing act you've got to, I suppose, manage quite carefully as you're in this kind of startup phase. because otherwise maybe you don't hit your aspirations or outcomes that you want.
Well, I very clearly in both of these companies, I have a sort of revenue-driven approach rather than a funding-driven approach.
Right. Yeah.
If the market and the clients are actually, purchasing the products and services, then we build in that direction. And only when that's clear would we bring in the funding. If you bring in the funding first and you don't have clear revenue paths, it's less predictable what your future is. So I'm very clearly a revenue-driven strategy for every decision that we make.
Okay, so you're actually doing like true customer development, where you're actually effectively bagging the orders for the demand for the product before you actually start working out how you actually deliver on it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, because I think as you probably have tracked and I've looked at as well, is that quite a few startups these days they focus on the funding before the revenue, and then they actually build a product before they actually have a market. And then you then start having to do the piece where you're trying to find a product market fit when you built something and does it actually fit the market? And then you get pressure around revenue. So it's interesting.
Well, I suppose my advice, or if anyone asked me and they were potentially starting up a company, it would be, get your idea clear, get the core team, or whether that's yourself or a couple of people, to approach potential customers and investors and actually test, would they buy it? Are they even prepared to invest in the idea? And I don't mean investors, I mean the clients themselves. Before you even set up an official company, test that the market really exists, and not just a once-off, but a reasonable sample data. A lot of people could say, okay, well, you could come in trouble because you don't, you could be exposed. But even if you talk about patents pending or whatever sort of protection, really first to market wins the game nowadays. So if you find out you have a real market and you can act quickly on it, and if you have a real market, the investors come to you very quickly because, they'll say, well, I have these 5 or 50 customers who are ready to buy or have already bought, and the money will come immediately because they realize it's real. It's not. We suffered the dot-com boom. I'm sure you were part of watching that happen, at least in the late 90s, before 2001. And then what we used to have a term called vaporware. And vaporware was a PowerPoint presentation that gave an idea, but there was no substance behind it. So I'm a firm believer in reaching out to clients and investors first. And I think they appreciate it too, because then they go, okay, well, these guys are actually doing their homework on the real market before they get into the game. So you can go back to them several times. And, even if you fail on some of them, all of these relationships are long-term in nature, and they'll appreciate when you make different distinctions, etc., whether that's clients or investors.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about there is the kind of the link. Well, I suppose the stuff that Steve Blank wrote about with the 4 steps to the Epiphany. Yeah, about get out of the office and validate the business idea and iterate before you start to get a lot of, I suppose obligations, you could say, to investors and to customers that you can't deliver on. Otherwise, it gets a bit messy. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think really, and this leads on to probably a question is, what would, if I'm just testing the market and I'm thinking of my kids in some way, is what am I trying to pass on as an idea is really, how do you turn someone into a customer? How do you turn an idea into an actual customer, independent of everything else? How do you run a company as well? So, actually setting up a company, setting up term sheets with everybody, setting up, the cap tables, the equity. How does your sales structure and distribution channels work? What are your salary agreements, or how will you partner on the labor side, whatever else it is? There's a lot of work in just understanding how that actually fits together. And then really, as we were saying, testing the market means really you're bootstrapping. So a lot of people want to skip bootstrapping, like what you said, and they want to get funding in, whether that's seed funding, Series A funding, or whatever. Bootstrapping basically means you as a founder or with your partner founders are not asking for anything from anybody. They're using their time, their money, their expertise, their connections to actually test the market and decide whether it's actually worth going on to the seed side of it.
Yeah.
So I think that bootstrapping element is sometimes underappreciated. People want to skip it. They already want to be a success. They want to see money flow. You really need to do a few bootstraps for every seed investment that you really make. And then by the time you hit the probability already increases for you. So that's kind of the takeaway that I'm learning so far.
Well, you know, I mean, you know the story of Wandisco, don't you, where we bootstrapped it to listing on the stock market. So when I left Tesco, we actually, we actually put a large six-figure sum of money into the company and to pay the engineers, and we had to obviously book revenue because we didn't really have a balance sheet at all. So it was pretty entertaining, and there was a lot of VCs wanted to offer us money, but we didn't take any money at all and took it to listing on the stock market. So that was quite an experience because I think and this was back in 2007. So it was before the kind of you could say the tech unicorns kind of was defined. So prior to that kind of wave of honeymoon period, you could say. And then what I would say is that also because of the things that happened with Apple, Google, Facebook, etc., where they did their listings, and then looking at some of the rounds that have happened, that then, to your point, people have then started to just default. They've gone from zero to seed. To seed. They're not bootstrapped at all. It's gone from a normal corporate day job straight into a fully funded seed, or some significant angel funding, and they've never had to fund it themselves out of their own pocket.
There's a term, Andrew, and I think it's a really important one. It's called skin in the game.
Yes.
And if you're dealing with someone who's never actually put skin in the game, i.e. they've been in a corporate job or they're going straight to something funded by somebody else, the sense of ownership just cannot be as high. It's just a fundamental difference. And it's not even about the amount, but it's literally about that part in the process of you putting your own skin in the game. Whether that's time or money doesn't actually even matter, but there's an investment there from the person that hasn't been funded by either a corporate or an investor. It's that in-between startup period that tells you a lot about the characters of the people involved.
Spot on. Bullseye. So what's your view for the future then? Where's your what do you see in the next 5, 10, 15 years then? Any kind of predictions? I mean, obviously it sounds like you've been involved in quite a few quite monumental shifts in technology over the last couple of decades, which is really great to hear. What's your? I mean, obviously, given tech now is pretty ubiquitous and is kind of intrinsically involved in all our lives. Are you seeing any concerns or what you're seeing from a good point of view and not so good point of view?
Well, I'm going to set a context first before I answer the question. I read a book by a guy called Peter Diamandis.
Oh yeah.
Abundance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Abundance, he asked, well, what was the most valuable metal on the planet 250 years ago? Right? And most people don't get the answer. Today it's palladium or gold or whatever else. It was actually aluminium. And the king of Ceylon, or what would it be, Sri Lanka, was one of the few people in the world who had cutlery in aluminium or whatever else. And it was so rare, it was unbelievable. Now you're saying aluminium rare. Well, if we look at our history, I don't remember the exact timing, but 150 years ago, a French chemist actually created the process to extract aluminium from bauxite, which is a form of sand. Now, aluminium that's created out of this bauxite is actually 8.5% of the Earth's crust. But before he created that process, aluminium was completely rare because nobody knew how to do that, we say, extraction process. So his definition, Peter's definition, which I really like, of a technologist is somebody who releases a previously scarce resource to become abundant. So aluminium was considered really abundant and really rare. A chemist actually made it one of the most, you know, I don't even know, but the chair or the table you might be sitting on right now could have some aluminium in it. IKEA ships tons of it every year for sure, but that was not feasible over 200 years ago. So I'll answer your question around predictions, but what I like about technology is us or our kids or whatever are going to release things that we currently mentally see as scarce to
Right.
something that's abundant and will change the way we live. If I go back to the more sort of narrower concept that I think you were sort of going into, I do think that at some point e-currencies will become normal. You know, first of all, they'll have to make the breakthrough. So electronic currency will become the normal day to day.
You mean digital currency? You mean
Digital currency? You know, whether that's backed by crypto or not is another story. Probability that will play a highly influential part in it, but it will be. Everybody will have a mobile phone or something similar to that, and digital currencies. Nation states might actually be something that could be reconsidered. We've had nations for a long time, but we've had pre-nations as well. And over the world, we've had Europe come together now, 28 states. America is 51 states. Asia is actually starting to combine into Asia. And China is running a lot of that. But the concept of a nation is defined by the UN at the moment with 195, and some that are outside that are not even recognized. A nation is an owner of a territory, an owner of a passport. They give you your license to be one of them. I think that with the digital currency and the amount of travel that's going on around the world will have to be up for a change. So if you're, you know,
you mean like the stuff that's happening in Estonia with the kind of the e-pass or the digital identity through Estonia? Is that right?
Sure. As an example, or Pangaea, there's a BitNation one as well. They're only ideas and they're basically in embryonic status. But if we take things like what Elon Musk is saying, that he's building the BFG, isn't it? The big Falcon rocket, or the BF4. And he said within 10 years, you'll be able to go to any city on the planet within 1 hour. So I could say to you, Andrew, I'm going to work in Australia and I'll meet you in London this evening today, this morning. And if that sort of thing becomes feasible and people's location becomes more ambiguous in terms of not being in the same place, that will have a knock-on impact on the concept of a nation or a citizenship. I don't know the answer, but I see these sort of gaps in our potential future. If transport is going to allow us to be in any part of the planet in 1 hour, where would people be given that choice? And it's not going to be as static as nowadays. So I see there's a fabric there ready to be broken. What will happen, I don't know. So transportation and logistics will play a huge part in how the future of the planet goes. You know?
Wow, that's a hell of a that's a great thing to think about, isn't it? I mean, you know, literally, I suppose it redefines the thing about being a global citizen. Because if you get anywhere in an hour, then you are a global citizen, aren't you?
Absolutely. You know, I'm very lucky. I have 4 boys, but you know, the tendency, and I could be making a mistake in saying this, but the tendency of a lot of couples is to go often to where the woman is from, because they're great network builders. They take care of the community, etc. So I could have four sons in 4 different locations on the planet as I grow older and I have grandkids, etc. So
I see. You mean when they meet their respective partners? Yeah, they could be anywhere scattered as four winds kind of thing. Yeah, okay.
And so you got to think, well, you know, would I be better off having a boat than a house? You know,
or a helicopter. Yeah.
Well, a helicopter wouldn't get that far, I guess. Well, it depends on how close they are. But anyway, it's just the idea of, you know, we have to think about really what are the permutations of the future that are probably going to impact our lives. And the ability to travel so easily and communicate so easily, like you're in London now, I'm in Kuala Lumpur, makes this whole global thing. Where does nations fit into that when we extend this beyond what we're talking about right today, 10 years down the line? I don't know the answer. If you talk to someone in the 1980s about the concept of picking up a mobile phone, it can, or you know, my grandfather was still alive, it would be futuristic for him. What the hell is happening here? Where's the wire?
Well, we all used to walk to the phone box and, you know, stand in the rain in the phone box, you know, with the red phone box, you know, and put the penny, put the 10p's in.
So anyway, back to Peter. Peter really helped me, not just about aluminium, but the idea of making potential scarce resources abundant means the future can be abundant in general if we choose to look at it like that. If we look at the media, you'd probably say the opposite. We're going into a recession or a depression or whatever else. But it's only looking at the drama element of life. It's not looking at there's lots of examples. 150 years ago, I don't remember the percentages, but the percentage of infant mortality was huge. And now it's almost negligible. If we look at the bigger concept, things are improving in human life on a day-to-day basis. If we look at the news, which is that top 1% superficial layer, you'd actually think the opposite. But it's only.
Well, yeah. If you watch the media, you think it was the end of the world tomorrow, wouldn't you? So, I mean, if you read the newspaper, it's every single story is negative and doom and gloom. So, but we know that from our previous discussions. It's the thought police.
Yeah. So you know, I'm very optimistic about the future, Andrew, and that's what I'd say my answer for now.
No, that's good. That's good. I love Peter Diamandis. I think he's a fantastic guy. He was moonshots and the stuff he's been doing with everything around that area. SpaceX, everything. It just takes people's potential and what people can do to another level. And you know, he's extremely interesting about how he talks about how he got the things funded for his moonshots and stuff like that. It's fascinating. So,
yeah, well, like the original one, and it's a great example to read or for anyone to hear or look up, is the first transatlantic flight. Why did that come about? I'll just tell the story really, really quickly. It was a hotelier in Paris actually wanted more tourists from around the world. There weren't enough coming from Europe. So he set a prize for pilots to actually fly from America to Europe. I think something like 22 pilots died, right? Now,
wow.
What Peter has done is use that same competitive model. I'll put up 15 million or 25 million, but what happens is so many, like if he puts up 25 million, maybe 125 million is invested by people to win that 25 million, but it's shared across multiples. So the investment that happens because of the competition is actually much higher than other models. And you end up getting potentially one or two winners out of that. So the whole model of inspiration for people to achieve something is what's very attractive about it.
Fantastic. So my final question for today's session was going to be about, I suppose, takeaways. Was given that you obviously have been involved in different things, you're working now today with different entrepreneurs. For the people that are on, you know, listen to the G&T Sessions podcast, you know, who are maybe founders, you know, co-founders in leadership teams, thinking about setting a startup up, thinking about getting involved in technology, thinking about growth. What would be your 3 to 5 takeaways that you would like to share with the audience?
Back to the basics of something we shared a little bit earlier on is clarify your idea, talk to potential customers more than anybody else, more than investors, more than anything. Find out if there's a market, refine it, invest time in checking whether that model is feasible from a market point of view. Until you have a market fit, the rest of it is only a consequence of that. And probably don't even give up on your model so quickly, even though, you may have other things to do, because sometimes you haven't come across the right person or the right pivot in that idea to turn it from your original idea into something that will bite by the market. I've been involved with a couple of companies that they started off with one product, but they've maybe done an iteration, and the 10th product was the actual one that got them to market.
The 10th?
The 10th one. I can think of one specific company that I was asked to join in Norway a long time ago, but it was the 10th one before the market really bit. Now they were fortunate.
Well, so they're constantly like pivoting, adjusting, iterating. Wow.
Yeah. So the whole process of learning how to do that and be aware of yourself and listen well enough to pivot on the idea, because you have what's almost like a block of coal. And that block of coal with those questions, with those pivots, can be crushed, if we want to call it, into a diamond. Now, do you have the patience, the strength, the energy, the questions, the curiosity, and the interaction with other people enough to make that process happen? And I wouldn't skip this bootstrapping process, which that effectively is, because that's when everything is a momentum of what you start with. It's like when we say in any company, why is X and Y and Z acting that way? But if you look at their boss or their boss's boss, you'll see the consequence of why they're acting, because they're conforming to the norm of that particular company. And your idea, when it grows, it will be everything downstream from the idea is a consequence of how well you refined it, or how you are refining it as you go. So really a founder needs to get their idea, focus on it, pivot on it, keep going with it as long as they can. It can take a long time. I'm trying to think, was a Robert Kiyosaki, is that you need to be able to invest 10 years in an idea. That's a long time to want to actually invest in the idea before it might become a fruition. But the moment it does, you'll be fully prepared to take advantage of the opportunity that comes along. If you change too much, you won't have enough context around the ecosystem of whatever that new idea is to actually take advantage of those types of opportunities. So really stick on that bootstrapping process, and it might be longer than you want, whether that's financially or for other reasons, but that will give you the depth of professional experience and understanding of that ecosystem to take advantage when the opportunity comes.
So you're basically saying lots of patience.
I know, you have to be very active. You have to be very active, but continue.
Well, no, but you got to. So, what you're saying, you got to be very active, but you got to be very patient. So you know, some people, I think, sometimes mentally actually try and race the answer too quickly, without having enough experience, enough data, and because they want to try and get that dopamine kind of that fix of, oh yeah, I've solved world peace, or I've solved that particular problem very, very quickly, but I think what you're saying is you have to, I won't say scorch the earth, but you have to do an extensive amount of customer development and work before you actually can validate that idea.
Absolutely.
Well, all I can say is thank you, Mr. McGuinness, for coming on this episode. It's been a fascinating journey across technology, personal experiences, and some advice as well at the end. It sounds like we're going to have to read some more books as well, which is always a good guidance for. I remember when I did my MBA, actually, I bought too many books, and then I've actually stored them all. But it's amazing how you have to traverse the pages. And one of my future guests actually is going to be about speed reading and super learning. So, which is, as we both know, is a very good skill to have, especially with the number of books that are out there. So all I can say is thank you very much for coming on the episode. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and have a fantastic evening in Kuala Lumpur tonight. And let's catch up soon.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And this is one of many conversations, and I do enjoy our conversation. So thank you for this one, and look forward to the next one as well.
No problem. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.